Are you ready to be unmessable with? Well, you are in the right place. Welcome to Be Unmessable With, the podcast where you get the inspiration, strategy, and coaching to be unmessable with, no matter what life throws at you. And now, your host, Jocelyn Herman-Saccio.
Hey there, welcome to the Be Unmessable With podcast. I am your host, Jocelyn Herman-Saccio, and I'm very excited about my guest today. Gary Montalvo is a leadership and business coach who has been the powerhouse behind solopreneurs, startups, organizations, international corporations for nearly 2 decades, although he doesn't look old enough to have had that kind of expertise, but it is true. I know how old he is, so it's true. And he's really known for his straightforward yet compassionate manner. He's a straight talker, but he loves you into it. He helps heart-centered entrepreneurs transform overwhelm into sustainable success by integrated structured growth strategies and systems. So we're going to talk a little bit about those kind of growth strategies during the episode today. He's got a contagious feel good energy, as you're soon to find out, and he delivers practical and actionable, which is one of my favorite things, follow through that supports people in bridging the gap between wherever they are now and where they authentically want to be. And additionally, he's got his own podcast called the Ownership Podcast, which I'm sure we'll hear about as well. So, welcome to the show, my friend and colleague, Gary Montalvo. Welcome, Gary.
Yay! Thank you so
Yay.
much. This is
It's
so
like visions
exciting.
realized, right? Remember, we were talking about your podcast and this is like, here we go.
Absolutely.
Very
Absolutely.
cool.
No, it's a testament to being at work as well. We're always sharing with others and empowering others in their vision, but we got to be at work and we got to be stretching for our goals and setting it up. So I acknowledge you for launching your podcast. I am so excited to be one of your first guests to kick it off.
And I was one of your first guests, so I feel like it's
That's
quid
right.
pro quo, Clarice. Yeah. So tell us, I know that was a brief intro for a vast career. So tell us a little bit about, your journey, how you ended up doing this, because I know you didn't start as a
Yeah.
coach. So how did
No.
this all happen?
So I actually started as an art director. I went to the School of Visual Arts, and I was always one of the artists in school, and I loved it. And I was like, okay, but I'm also poor, so I can't go to, like, I have to figure out how to make money. And so the compromise was like, oh, graphic design, commercial art, okay. So I went to the School of Visual Arts. I had a blast there, graduated top of my class. Then my first job ever at 22 years old, I was an art director at Sony Music. And this was back
Wow,
when you
that's
actually
fun.
did CDs and you had to, if you remember those days.
I do remember those days. Now vinyl's back. So, who would have thunk, right?
So I was there for 4 years and started to get confronted with my leadership and the idea of being overwhelmed by this massive machine called Sony Music. And I started to squirrel a little bit and said, okay, I like this, but it's too much. So I went to another job and I went to do theater posters I went to a small advertising agency and I did theater posters there. And I was there for 4 years doing a lot of the Broadway shows, a lot of fun, got to see many, many shows, but also started to get confronted with my leadership. It was like, you went to art school, they taught you how to make something really pretty, but they weren't teaching you how to walk into the room with artists, their managers, their entourage, the labels, the all those people, right? And so I
The
was like in
soft
my early
skills.
20s.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I was in my early 20s trying to figure this out and giving people direction, trying to manage people that were twice my age. And that didn't work out. Well, no, it worked out. I was there 4 years. I had a great time. But that experience that I was looking for of feeling at home with myself, I hadn't found that yet. And so I decided to leave and go off on my own and say, okay, let me freelance. Let me do my own thing. That's less pressure, right? That's, you know, and it wasn't. because you take
It's the
yourself wherever you
illusion of
go. Yeah.
exactly, and it's the illusion of less pressure. It's like you got to come up with every job, you know?
Yeah, you take yourself wherever you go, but what I did start to discover was coaching.
Mhm.
I started to invest in myself in personal development work, and I started to invest in me trying to figure out how to get over this experience that I kept having of just not feeling enough when I was in a room. And I found this personal development training that changed my life. It completely gave me confidence, it gave me power, and it gave me a lot of tools. And it was amazing. And then I started to really fall in love with coaching, and I said, okay, I want more of this. And so then I started my journey of training myself as a coach, really as a hobby at first, because I just loved it so much. I kept volunteering for all the roles and volunteering for all the positions. And eventually, the company that I was working for at the time offered me a job. And they said, why don't you come on staff? And I said, okay, this is fun. But what was great about it is that it let me learn very quickly because hundreds of people were coming through the doors every month. And so I just got to really hone in my coaching skills.
Mm.
You're coaching 100 people every month in some way, shape, or form. You get really good at it. And then I kind of was like, I got the bug and I started my own business and started my own journey. And then the journey of starting your own journey starts.
Yes, exactly. The never-ending journey.
But what I loved about it was that, as a designer, I never really had the experience of making an impact with others.
Mm.
And not to say that I couldn't have, but that you could have a conversation with someone and that conversation could tweak something and change someone's life, change someone's trajectory. I was like, sign me up.
It's
Sign me
like a
up. I'm
drug. I
doing
know.
this. I'm doing this
It's
all day.
you're speaking to the choir because that is like heroin, although this is not how you do heroin, I don't think.
Yeah.
But it's like there's nothing better. There's nothing better than
Yeah.
making that kind of impact and the privilege that it
Yeah,
is
that's
to
exactly it. Like people come to me all the time, like, "Oh my God, thank you so much." I'm like, thank you, like, thank me." Like,
exactly.
it's a privilege to be able to do this work, and the entrepreneurial thing. Me working with entrepreneurs also came as an accident, or not an accident, but something that got developed later. Because I started as a life coach, and I was like, it's too many feelings, too many emotions, too much whininess. I'm like, no, 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 no offense to any of the life coaches, but I was like, I want action. I want to get on the court. I know I'm speaking to your heart right now, Jocelyn.
I know.
I was
I'm
like,
like action. That's my middle name.
yeah,
Action
yeah,
Jackson.
yeah.
That's me.
Yeah. I'm like, I want to be up to like, come on. So then I was like trying to find my way and entrepreneur and then it was like empowerment coach and then leadership coach. And what really started to happen is as I started to figure out how to grow my own business, because that was a journey and we'll get into that later. But as I started to figure out how to grow my own business and learn all the pains and struggles and challenges, I got really passionate about sharing that with others because
Mm.
I know just how much it means to coach entrepreneurs. I know what it means for entrepreneurs to do this. Like, I think I read a statistic that only about 10% of Americans actually start businesses. I dare to say that more want to,
And only
but
10% of those businesses succeed or at
oh,
least
yeah,
last past the second year.
yeah, 100%. So in that journey though, I got really passionate about empowering those people because I know that when you empower an entrepreneur, they don't keep it to themselves. There's a ripple effect that happens. They take that and they spread it to their clients, their customers, they spread it to their families, they spread it to their communities. And I'm really someone who's committed to having the biggest impact possible. So as selfishly, I'm like, okay, how can I duplicate myself? How can I duplicate my impact, multiply my impact? And so working with entrepreneurs is just for me such a passion of mine because I know how much it means to them and I know what happens when they get it. I know the impact and I know what's at stake, when they get it, when they finally have that breakthrough. So that's kind of a little bit of a journey of how I got here. It hasn't been a direct journey. I didn't wake up one day and said, "Hey, I'm gonna go work with entrepreneurs." It was really something that came about, um, dancing through life and listening for what shows up and being in the discovery of what shows up. And I never, you would have asked me 25 years ago that I would not be designing today, I would have told you were crazy. Absolutely
Well,
crazy.
now I have to ask you, do you design any of your graphics for your stuff at least?
So I try not to. I
Smart
have people that
answer.
help me with that. Yeah, well, you know what it is? You can't like turn it off. So what ends up happening now is that I have them start it, and then I'll go, okay, just let me get it for a few minutes and let me make those tweaks, and then okay, here we go.
Yeah,
'Cause-
exactly. It's like, because I used to be a singer and people go, "Oh, do you still sing?" And I'm like, "No, I do not still sing." And I don't have any desire to sing. I have people around me that are way better singers than me, and I don't even go to karaoke anymore. But I can imagine that if I had the muscle you had in design, that I could not look at the designs of someone else's for me without at least adding my 5 cents.
It's so hard. It's so hard. But and I've had to let go of my standards a bit. I've had to like lower my expectations just to be able to, because at the end of the day, and this is a lesson for entrepreneurs, we can very easily start obsessing over all these details that mean a lot to you, but at the end of the day don't really have any impact on your bottom line or on the growth of the business. So I've had to train myself to go, I know you care about this, Gary, but this is not one of those times where this is not a hill you want to die on. Okay. So,
Yes, and even
you know,
somebody else doing it 80% as good as you would is better than you doing it as an
100%.
entrepreneur, because that's one of the biggest prisons that entrepreneurs get into as entrepreneurs is trying to do everything, you
Speak
know?
on it. Speak on it. It's
Exactly. Well,
so,
you speak on it. That's why I have you here. You speak on
it
it.
is 100%. And, it's so interesting because you end up trying to save money. And I get it. You're starting out, income is limited. And so you get in this thing where you're trying to save money and you're trying to save your resources. But what people don't keep what they don't do the math in, it's like, okay, those 3 or 4 hours that's gonna take you to figure out Canva, how many sales conversations can you have during that time? Or can you spend the $50 on Fiverr to get that done so that you can have 4 hours to do the reach outs? And it puts you in a scarcity mindset that starts to really hurt you. And so you start to collect all these things that you need to now do. You got to do, I mean, now we both have podcasts. The first thing I did was, okay, no, I'm outsourcing this. I'm outsourcing the editing. I'm outsourcing the graphics for it. I hired a VA. And it's like my business I'm restarting my business, as you know, so it's not like money's flowing in yet, but that time that I'm spending on that is time that I can put back into the business, right? So
Totally.
it's short-sighted to think that you have to try to do everything yourself. It's much better to just spend, especially with all the resources that are available for you now. There's so many
Oh, yeah,
options.
and there's so many inexpensive options, but I'm sure you do, have clients that have plenty of money coming in. They just have trouble letting
Yeah,
go. They have
yeah,
trouble releasing and
yeah,
delegating because in some ways it is easier to just do it because you know how to do it, but then that's your weak muscle in training and
yeah,
delegating. And as a leader, one of the biggest things is allowing other people to rise up and be leaders and to develop themselves, and when people don't give people that space to actually take over accountabilities that you've had as the leader, they don't get to grow. So
yeah.
it's kind of a ripoff for them if you don't give away some of the tasks, so to speak.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you have to. You can't, at some point, there's only 24 hours in a day and you have to sleep for a few of those. So you're always going to be the funnel. And what happens is people are waiting for you. People are standing by. No one can move. So it's a skill set that you absolutely have to learn. And it's hard. It's hard to master that sometimes because, a lot of entrepreneurs are control freaks.
I'm
I, you know,
sure there are
uh,
some people like that, but I don't know any of them.
you don't know any of that, right? Yeah, so you 100% you have to develop a skill set and develop that practice of delegating and training others, quite frankly. And it's
Yeah,
possible to train them in your processes, but it does require you to stop and articulate your processes, record your processes and
exactly.
explain
Make a
your
playbook.
processes. Yeah. And then when they make mistakes, which they will, the correction of those processes, right? The corrections of them. So yeah.
And other than being control freaks, what are some of the other mistakes that entrepreneurs make in the early stages of their businesses, which probably contributes to most small businesses not succeeding? So,
Yeah.
what are some of those mistakes that you found as you work with entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I mean, it's some of it we've been talking about, right? It's this idea that everything has to be perfect. This idea that, oh, my branding has to be perfect. And I see people go and spend thousands and thousands of dollars in investing in branding work, and it's like, guys, when you're in your first couple of years, you have no idea what your brand is. Like you have no idea what your product is. So you're testing. And so what happens is you're not taking sufficient action to test the product, meaning you're not having enough conversations with people to see if people are interested in buying the product, to see if your offer has any interest, to see if the pricing is accurate, to see if your marketing positioning is the right one for you. So you end up doing all this, like, let me make the perfect brand, let me come up with the perfect name, let me come up with the perfect logo, let me come up. But then in 2 years, once you collect all that data, you probably have to do a lot of
Redo
new
everything.
branding work
Yeah,
and redo it,
exactly.
right? So I
I'm
always,
just doing that right now. I'm just redoing everything, my website, my colors, everything. But when I started, everything was orange. I
yeah,
just did what I liked.
yeah,
But thank God, didn't get trapped in that whole perfectionism thing. I can't imagine how much
yeah.
that would slow someone up.
Yeah, well, you're really masterful at this. It's like just the moving quickly. Like you really want to make as many mistakes as possible when you start out. Like you want to fail fast, recover, and recover fast. That's really what's going to determine your success. How quickly can you recover from these mistakes? When you get into this perfectionist role, behavior pattern, it just, what happens is you have to slow down and you have to try to protect yourself, and you have to try to manipulate the game in such a way so that you don't fail and you don't make mistakes.
Yeah.
So inevitably you end up making the game safer, you end up making the game smaller, and that's going to hurt you in the long run. You want to, and listen, the bigger your game, the more impact. It's like the mistakes are going to have. So do it at the beginning, learn your lessons fast now, so that when you actually do have a business that has momentum, these mistakes aren't costing you more money down the road.
I think that's
um
brilliant, Gary. Everybody listening, if you're an entrepreneur, fail fast. I love that. It's like fail fast so that you can learn and correct quickly and elevate quickly
yeah,
rather than wait and get everything perfect and then roll it out and find out nobody wants it in the first place.
yeah, 100%. And I think the other, so when we start, we end up kind of just going, and then we discover things, so we start responding. But at some point, very early on, you kind of got to stop and start implementing systems for yourself, because then what
Oh,
happens is,
good. Yeah. Talk
yeah,
about this because this is such a big thing for people. They're just doing stuff, but
yeah,
there's no system. And then I think this is what you talk about sustainable results. They're connected
100%,
to this. Yeah, good. Talk more about that.
yeah,
We all need to, I
yeah.
need to hear this.
And listen,
Please tell me.
it's appropriate that at the beginning you're kind of just going, because you're learning, you're figuring things out. And as I said, I want you to fail fast. But pretty soon you got to start implementing structures. You got to start implementing systems. If you find yourself doing the same behavior over and over again, well, how can I systemize that? If something is taking up a long time getting in your way, how can I delegate that? Is it valuable for me to invest in a virtual assistant overseas for $4 or $5 an hour to free up 10, 12, 20 hours a week from me so that I can implement that on growth? If you don't do that, what happens is the structure is just weak, and so you might experience growth, you might experience momentum, and it might be counterintuitive to now stop the momentum of the growth to like organize yourself and set up a process. But if you don't do that, what happens is at some point that growth collapses again, because it's just a structural problem. Imagine if you keep building a building without really putting the foundation in place. You can go 3, 4, 5, 6 stories, but at some point that building is going to go, nope, we're going to go back down. And now
Yeah, we don't have the
rebuilding
basics.
it becomes an utter mess, because now you're trying to
Mm.
fly the plane while you're building the systems. So don't take that for granted. Really look at am I doing regular planning? And that's a great muscle to develop from the beginning. If people did that, I probably wouldn't have any business. But
I hear you. That's almost everything I do with people, I get it.
yeah,
But what are some strategies, like if you are going to do regular planning, what are some strategies so you can plan from a development growth oriented perspective, rather than a survival or just dealing with what life is throwing at you kind of perspective?
yeah, that's a really good distinction, because when people do start to plan, it ends up being in reaction. So I'm a big believer that you have to carve out time for this type of work. It's really difficult to do this work while you're in the business, while you're in the putting out the fires. So what does that mean? For me, I have time every quarter to do this. I have time every month in my calendar to do this. I try to get
Mhm.
out of my personal space. Like, I actually go somewhere else. Sometimes I rent a hotel room somewhere. Sometimes I get an Airbnb and I just spend like 2 days,
You
three
live
days.
in an Airbnb. You live in the most beautiful place. Like, really? You got a pool,
No,
you got a
but
thing. It's
but you
like,
have to, but that just shows you have to get out of your routine, because you're trying to
that's very
interrupt your
good.
patterns.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I did it, I went to St. Martin last year, and I just sat there for 3 days dreaming
I think
and
you and I should swap. We should hub swap. You come to Paris, you take my place. I'll go to Florida. And I'll take your
I
place. It'll
love
be
that so much.
for our strategy days.
I love that so much. But it's been really valuable for me to get out of the. Because listen, whenever it takes me a day just to quiet my mind and stop worrying about all the stuff that I have to do. So that's why I say get out of your space, because if you're home, you're always going to be in the routine of, I've got the dogs, I've got my partner, I've got my family. It's really easy. So this type of work and listen, you don't have to be as dramatic as me and go to St. Martin and go for 3 days, but like, can you even go work at Starbucks? Get out of your
Yeah.
normal routine and do that
Or the
planning work.
park,
The park,
someplace where you
nature.
can,
Yeah,
yep, be around the sun, be out in the sun, which, stimulates your brain in a way that, lights in your house don't,
100%.
and opens your breathing, it opens your heart. I think that's so smart. Really, really good coaching.
Yeah. Yes, and have that be a regular practice, and have it be, as my friend would say, unmessable with. It's like, that's not an optional time. That's not like, oh, something more exciting came. Like, no, no, no. That's your time to work on your business. It's non-negotiable. And you always, so for me, during that time, you always have to know what you're doing in the next month, in the next 3 months. I think when you're new in your business, you probably don't have to have a year plan, or probably the first year you maybe don't even need a 6 month plan, but every 3 months you should be putting in place, what am I doing, what's the game plan. And what I mean by that is, like, every month you add the other month at the end, so
Extra month,
you're
yes.
always 3 months out. The moment you start to get some momentum, I would definitely push that up to 6 months. um and make sure that you're implementing that. It gives you direction, it gives you focus, it lets you know when to pivot. The other thing that I see people not do is they're just not working inside of sales goals. And I know that it's like, sales, but here's the bottom line. If you don't know how much money you need to make in order to keep the lights on, in order to keep your business going, like your business needs money. Like you actually need to reinvest money into your business. Like these everything, the email, the platforms, the websites, it all requires money.
Vimeo and Descript and your website hosting and everything.
Everything, Canva, like it all requires money. So you're gonna need to put at least a couple $100 into your business every month. So if you don't do the work of knowing what that bottom line is and how much money you need to bring in at a minimum just to keep things going, you're going to get very easily distracted by all the stuff that is seemingly very exciting, but it doesn't really move the needle. I'll give you a perfect example. Everybody now wants to be a social media influencer. There is an incredible amount of pressure to create content all the time. Anybody who has tried to create content knows that it's a full-time job just to create the content. But for most of you, you don't make your money online. Like that's not how you bring in customers. For a lot of you, you bring in your customers through connections, through networking, through reaching out. But yet here you are putting all this pressure on yourself, putting all this focus on yourself to be this social media influencer. Now, I'm not saying don't do that. We all need to have social media presence. We all need to have content. Like that needs to happen.
And consistency
Yeah.
and
But in
all
the
of that.
order of, but in your list of priorities, if you make your money from referrals and connecting with people, then for you, calling 3 people every day is far more important than posting a reel every day.
Right.
So create a social media strategy that allows you to have the room to do your reach out, to do your touch points, because at the end of the day, that is what's going to move the needle for you in your business. If we don't do the work of understanding those numbers, it's very easy to get distracted with the shiny stuff, with the stuff that's more fun for us, with the stuff that it feels like pressure. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example with my podcast. My podcast is not monetized yet. I love doing it. It's a passion of mine. But there are times where I'm just like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, no, that's not the priority. It's like I have to get these touch points out. I have to get this email out to my list because that is how I get people, to sign up for things. Not through my podcast yet. So that could be a very easy distraction for me because it's fun, it's
Right.
exciting, and also people are watching. Like it has to be good because people are watching. It has to launch on
And it's
Tuesdays.
it's multi-purpose because you can use it to create content. So it kind of
Yeah,
hits, 10 birds with one stone, although that's a very morbid analogy. I don't like that, but it's kind of like you get to if you can repurpose things, it's a good way of streamlining your
yeah,
time also. When you write a newsletter to your list or an email to your list, how do you repurpose that to be social media content?
yeah,
Or something like that, to not have to reinvent the wheel every day with a different thing, to kind of create umbrellas.
yeah. Well, that's what I meant when I said create a social media strategy that works for you, right? So I'm I'm not somebody who can sit there and record reels with ease, but you put me in front of somebody and I can have conversations and it flows and that's I feel at home in that scenario. So for me, recording a podcast and taking that content and slicing it and dicing it in every possible way, it's a much more effective strategy in content creation. It's still time consuming, but it fits into my personality and my goals much easier than me now trying to become a entertainer on social media and doing all the different voices, and hey,
TikTok
how do you feel,
dances and,
like, oh, how do you feel about that? Oh, did you hear this part? And you're like,
That would definitely make me crazy. But I think I'm hearing a few things from what I'm going to pull and kind of dilute a
yeah,
few of the things you're saying. So one thing, and I completely agree with everything you're saying, but one thing is about knowing what the reality is, dollars and cents wise. And people, I think, sometimes are afraid to deal with the reality of that,
terrified.
not just in their business, but in their life. They don't want to, like, if they don't open the credit card bill, it's not real or something. It's kind of like, not being related to reality about numbers is a big mistake in any area, whether you're an entrepreneur or not. So that's a very like a instant tip that you could do today as an entrepreneur to get clear about what are you spending, because you sign up for things, right? You sign up for this subscription and that subscription, but you don't maybe have a master list of what am I spending on all this stuff, so that's very, very powerful. Then the other thing I can hear in what you're saying is get clear about what you love to do and what you're good at doing, and don't try and be everything.
Hmm.
Let somebody do what they do. You don't have to be the actor, the voiceover, the this, the that. If you're great at interviewing people and talking to people, use that and find a way to multi-use it rather than trying to be everything to everyone just because you think you should.
Yeah, 100%. And the last thing I want to say about it is, so when you get on this journey, part of what you're going to discover is you're going to be confronted with all the places where you're limited by your pre-existing programming. So we just talked about money. That's a very common one, you know. So for me, for example, I'm the parent of immigrants. My
You're the child of
oh,
immigrants,
thank
but
you for
yes,
that.
no problem. I was like, he's not that old. I know
I'm
I
not
said he
that old.
looked young, but
I'm Lord have
yeah.
mercy. I'm the child of immigrants. My parents are from the Dominican
you
Republic, and my
you're the
education,
parent of puppies.
yes. My education on money was like you save for an emergency under the mattress, and don't spend
Yeah.
money in any way that's not like about the maintenance of life, right? So like getting a massage is like, what,
The
but
what?
if no, you buy food,
Like
you buy
indulgent
a
or
roof,
something.
yeah.
Yeah.
So as you become an entrepreneur, I've had to confront all that, right? As I've learned to have sales conversations, I've had to confront all that. So do not underestimate that work is going to need to happen. Be very gentle and gracious with yourself when you discover that it needs to happen. And all there is to do is go to work at dismantling that. There's a lot of resources. You can hire coaches, you can do some personal development work. You can read, you can do exercises. If you're gonna do this on your own, I invite you to do things that are action oriented, not just theoretical. So like reading books and watching videos by themselves don't do anything. It needs to be accompanied with like taking action on it, and then somehow debriefing those actions and going back and taking more actions. That's why coaching can't really compare to those things, because the coaching process just forces you to do that work on a week to week basis. But don't underestimate that that's going to happen, because what I see very often now is like people go now, they get confronted with it, and instead of like, oh yeah, this makes total sense, I'm doing something new and something that's going to challenge me, I have to now do the work of creating the new mindset, the new belief
Brain
system to
patterns.
support
Yeah.
that, right? This makes perfect sense. What they do instead is going like, oh shit, what's wrong with me? How come everybody on Instagram is now flying and doing so successful, but now I'm struggling? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with it? It's not going to work. And now you go into avoidance, you go into protection, you go into all the stuff that we do to try to, like your childhood, your little 5, 6, 7 year old now starts to run the show. Be careful of that. Like look out for that,
Mm.
and know that it's going to happen. And that's also a mistake that I think a lot of entrepreneurs make, that when that stuff comes up, they don't embrace it. They don't give it a seat with you and say,
Yeah,
okay,
they
come on.
kind
They
of.
just go, no, 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 everything's okay. Ooh, Instagram, everything's
Yeah.
okay. Look what a wonderful life I'm living. Meanwhile the house is on fire in the back. So
I mean, it's so many gems in what you're saying for anybody who is an entrepreneur or wants to be an entrepreneur. But given this is called Be Unmessable With, and you and I have engaged in the Unmessable With methodology for a while now, right? What's a time in your life where, so perfect with what you're saying about, oh, everything's fine, where
yeah,
everything wasn't fine, where you dealt with something really super challenging, some circumstance that could have taken you out, taken you down for the count, but somehow you emerged unmessable with,
yeah.
or triumphant, or resilient. What's an example of something like that? And what did you pull upon?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was, I know I gave you the brief version of how I started my business, but I skipped over the interesting bits. So, just everything I'm talking about is from my personal experience. I think that's what makes me really good at what I do is that I'm not just sitting here talking theory. I've lived it, and still live it every day, right? So I started my business, and immediately the crash of 2008 happened. And
Good timing.
so nobody was hiring nobody, right? And it was absolute panic, and especially in New York City, where we're from. And I think the you also have to get the mindset. Like, I had trained for a really long time to be an art director. I had a pedigree. I went to one of the top art schools. I graduated top of my class. I've worked at Sony. I've worked at really reputable places. I had referrals by really reputable people. I had a certain pedigree when it came to design. When I said I was going to be a coach, I had nothing but
Mm,
a little piece of paper that said I completed some hours of certification, right? But I had a business card, which I had designed myself.
I bet.
And that's it. Nothing else. So like walking into a room and just like really standing in that declaration of like, I'm a coach just because I said so, and I have nothing to back me up. By the way, this was in 2008 when people didn't even know what coaching was, and everybody was like, "What do you
Mm,
mean? What are you talking about?" So,
baseball, football, what are you
yeah,
talking about?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So for the next 5 years, I proceeded to wait for Oprah to discover me. And I did nothing worthy of her discovering me. But somehow Oprah was going to hear about me, and she was going to reach out, and then that was going to jumpstart my career.
Mm,
I did a lot of waiting. I did a lot of avoiding. Financially, things got bad. I moved back home with my parents. I was burying my head in the sand with my finances. I was, overdrafting my account. The embarrassment was, I was so embarrassed. I was so embarrassed and hiding and waiting for, Oprah to discover me in this place. And I had 5 years of that. And to be honest, I had reached the point where it was like, okay, you're running out of time here. Like, you cannot keep living this. If you can't figure this out soon,
yeah.
you're gonna have to go back to work. You just can't keep doing this. And I had a very serious conversation with myself. I actually went to an event where my previous coaches were hosting, and they, they had a very come to Jesus conversation from the front of the room. And the event was in Puerto Rico, and I walked out to the beach, and I looked out, and I drew a line in the sand, and I
Mm,
literally crossed it, and I said, no more. Like, we're going in. And at that moment, finally started the work of building my business, not avoiding it, not waiting, not burying my head in the sand, not trying to manifest clients out of the abyss without them,
Well,
Um,
Oprah sending them, yeah.
Oprah, yeah, and I hired a coach, and that was a game changer for me. And it's always a
Yeah,
little bit like, hey, I'm a coach, hire a coach. But honestly, it was the thing that changed the game for me, because I now had someone that gave me strategies to grow, which were really missing for me. And I had someone really supporting me through those scary moments. And
yeah,
within a year of me crossing that line in the sand, I created more income than the last 5 years out of my practice, right? And then within the second year, I had doubled, and I more than doubled and created a 6-figure business. So it really wasn't, and that's when my passion came, because I was like, I know what the 5 years is like. I know what the 5 years is like. So me having that breakthrough, and by the way, if you're listening, it wasn't about the funnel. It wasn't about the right thing. It wasn't about the right tool. It wasn't about the right Instagram account. It really was recreating my mindset and dealing with myself, and stopping to avoid and stop the excuses, and really and create safety for yourself, create the support that you need. I'm not one of these people that's just like, do whatever it takes, stop being a baby. That's not what I'm saying at all. I had support. I had people that really wrapped their arms. I had people that I could go cry to. I had all of that. I took care of myself, but I wasn't avoiding it anymore. I
mm,
wasn't waiting for it to show up. There was no knight in shining armor, that was going to hand me the business. Oprah wasn't coming. And I had to really get clear about that. And I'm really proud of myself, because if you look at, so as you know, 6 years ago, one of my corporate clients offered me a job. So I closed my coaching practice and I went to work for Limelight for about 5.5 years, and it was beautiful. I loved it. And about 6 months ago, well, a year ago, I started the transition of starting my business again, because I just missed coaching. I kept moving away from what my area of genius is. In the last 6 months, what I've created in my business this time around, it's like, so much faster than I did it. It took me 6, 7 years to create what I've created this time around, because you don't lose that. Once you have
yeah.
that lesson, it's like that breakthrough of learning how to balance in a bicycle. The moment you have that breakthrough, is yours, and you can access it anytime you want. So once you have that breakthrough of being unmessable with, once, for me, I distinguish it as ownership. Once you have that distinction of being in ownership, and you get that you are the driver, that you have something to say about it. You may not have control over all the circumstances. In fact, you don't even try it. It's absolutely a false narrative. You don't have control over half of the stuff that happens, but you always have
Or of
control over.
anything, really. It's an
Yeah,
illusion of
yeah,
control, but yes.
yeah. But you have something to say about how you show up. You have something to say
Yes.
about how you choose to interpret situations. You have something to say about how you create safety for yourself and create support for yourself, how you create community for yourself. All those things you do have something to say about. And when you exercise those things, magic happens and you can move mountains. So
I
yeah.
love it. I love it. Magic. That's exact. Fail fast and make magic. I
And make
think that's
magic.
the two key things here. I love it.
Yeah.
And I know you want to offer everybody something. So why don't you talk a little bit about what you're gifting to the people who are listening and watching?
Yeah. So the first thing is, I want to invite you to my podcast. If you have a listen, it's called The Ownership Game, and you can find it on Spotify and YouTube
I'll
and
have the link
Apple,
also in
all the
the show
places,
notes. I'll
right?
make sure. Yeah, definitely.
And then for the entrepreneurs who are listening, one of the things that happens is, okay, now you want to get to work on what are the areas of your business that you need to start tweaking and implementing structure. But there's many areas, and sometimes it's hard for you to know where to start. So if you go to my website, which is just GaryMontalvo.com, there is a check your biz assessment there, check your business assessment. And so what you do is you take some time to fill that out, and it's going to actually tell you what areas of your business you need to focus in order to have, what's the low hanging fruit, because that's what you want to focus on first. What's the low hanging fruit? Sometimes we make it hard and we're like, oh, I have to start rebuilding the engine. It's like, well, maybe, but if you just go and update the windshield wipers, that's going to give you enough productivity so that when you go do the tires, it's not, it won't be as hard.
I love
So
it.
that's going to be available for you there if you go to the website and just sign up for it, and you can have that as well.
That's so great. Thank you so much. And really, you guys, everybody should go to his website, should fill that out. I mean, I'm going to fill it out and find out, what when shall I have to change next? And I so appreciate you taking the time to be here. It's so much fun always
Aw.
talking to you. I feel like we could do this every quarter and
Every
create
time.
such value. We
Have me
really could,
back. Have me back.
I will. Game on, my friend, game on. And for everybody listening, if you got value, which I can't imagine if you were awake that you didn't get value, or something resonated with you, it impacted you, please rate and review this episode and share it. Share with anybody you know that's an entrepreneur, wants to be an entrepreneur. And this isn't just about entrepreneurship, this is about life. Avoiding and not dealing with reality is never going to get you where you want to be. So if you want to get where you authentically want to be, listen, share, rate, review, and we will see you on the next episode of the Be Unmessable With podcast. Thank you
Bye.
so much for tuning in to this episode of Be Unmessable With the podcast. And I never take for granted that you've spent a little time with us today. And I want to make sure that you get value every time you do. So, in that spirit, I want to offer you my free Transcending Imposter Syndrome workbook. And this is, if anything around imposter syndrome messes with you, this is a way to disappear that whole thing so you can emerge unmessable with. I also look forward to hearing from you, any feedback and any ideas for future episodes that would support you in your unmessable with journey. Thanks again, and see you next time.